coming up in this episode. Sure, you can look externally for inspiration, but at the end of the day, you are one of one.
There is so much beauty in that. And with human design, you really do become the canary in the gold mine. You've been bestowed with a divine blueprint that is only yours. And if you value your truth, if you value life, then you value that divine blueprint. And the only question left is, what are you going to do with it?
You are now listening to the Here for the Truth podcast, hosted by Joel Rafidi and Yerasimos.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Here for the Truth podcast. I'm Joel Rafidi, got my co-host Yerasimos with me as always. Today, it's just us dropping a solo episode, and we kind of wanted to dive into the power and the impact that human design has had in our lives. And human design is something that's coming to the fray a lot more. There's a lot of information about it. Many people are getting hip and privy to it. And we just think it's really important to, dive into some of the basic strategies that you can implement in your life where human design can have a really profound impact, essentially. I'm going to share some personal stories as well about our kind of journey with human design. Right before we dive into that conversation, wherever you're listening to this, if you're down to support this podcast on a basic level, all we're asking is to hit that follow button wherever you're listening, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else. And if you'd like to go a step further when you feel you have the time, if you could leave a review, we'd really appreciate that as well. All right. So human design, funnily enough, I was introduced to around the same time that I met Yerasimos. I remember, I think it was like a day after we met, we shared some info. I shared with you some of your taroscopic information, some of what the tarot and the taroscopic astrology says about your nature. Then you sent me back this chart, this human design chart, which just looked like a bunch of, hoobaloo. Whatever that word means.
So crazy to think back about 4.5 or so years ago, just where we were and what we were sharing and just how things have evolved. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. And so I got the information that I was a generator, that I was an emotional authority, that I had a 6-2 profile, none of which I really knew what it meant at the time. But obviously I have a much more intimate understanding of that at the moment. So I guess, to kind of kick this one off, listeners are going to be at a different level of understanding when it comes to human design. Some people might be pretty far in the journey. Some people might have zero idea what the hell we're talking about, even this far into the conversation. So I guess, do you want to give like a basic 5-minute kind of overview to call those people into the circle a little bit for those that are confused right now?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it at 5 minutes. We've done a couple other episodes on human design with Bella and Nicole, and also
Sam Zagar.
And so we obviously explored things in a deeper, more nuanced way. And we kind of just wanted to go over human design in a basic level and go deeply into how it's impacted us. And so that's the focus of this episode. Human design is a system of self-knowledge. It's known as the science of differentiation. And the reality is, and something Joel and I talk about often, is that we're a unique seed of consciousness. And each one of us has, unique special things about us. And human design is a system that allows you to understand that. And so it integrates 4, I guess you can say, ancient systems and 2 modern sciences, you can say. Which I feel like that stuff is less important than like getting your chart, understanding the elements of the chart and applying it into your life. But the 4 systems are the Chinese I Ching, Western astrology, a 9-centered chakra system, and the tree of life. And then the 2 modern sciences is understanding the genetic code and the neutrinos. So the 64 genetic codons correlate with the 64 gates in human design and the 64 hexagrams, but whatever, we don't need to get into that. And so, the story, I want to just talk about the story of human design because it is pretty esoteric. And as someone who can be skeptical, at times I'm like, what? This is wild. And so how the story goes is there was this guy, I think his name was Robert Alan Krakauer or Alan Robert Krakauer. I think I mix the order sometimes. He was a marketing executive in Canada, and he kind of just had this moment in his life in the 70s where he's like, I need to go on my journey, and the life that I have isn't what I want. And so he found himself on the island of Ibiza. And so, as the story goes, it was, I believe, January 3rd, 1987. He had a house on one side of the island and he was out. And when he came back home, he noticed that his door was open and the light was on. And so when he walked into his villa, the door shut behind him. And then this just voice kind of like took over his consciousness. This is how he tells the story. And again, for many people listening, you might be like, what the fuck? I was that way. And I kind of still am that way. But then, with all the stuff that we start learning and the possibilities and the telepathy tapes and all the crazy experiences people have, like, I'm kind of just like, man, do we really even know what this reality is?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, and for me, with all this stuff, the proof's in the pudding. Does it allow me to understand myself more? Does it allow me to live more authentically? And if it does, then cool, I'm going to integrate it into my life. So as the story goes, this voice took him over for 8 days, 8 nights, and just kind of like, he was just writing everything down. The foundational, very basic foundational elements of human design that came to him at that time. And then, during that time, you had a lot of seekers in the world, in Ibiza and traveling. And so he started kind of sharing this information and teaching people. And as the story goes, or at least as how I have heard it, after a year, he was like, this responsibility is too much. I'm done. I burn everything. I got to go. And then a year after, he comes back, and not everyone obviously listened to him, I don't think. They're like, no, this knowledge is important. We're not burning it. And so, he made this his life story, and he continued to evolve and grow human design. And so, there are those that are detractors, as there were with astrology and these other systems. And there are other people that look at human design through a different lens. But, the way I look at it is based on the source material and the things that came from Ra. And I do just want to preface this by saying I'm not a dogmatist. Joel's not a dogmatist. Human design isn't the only way to gain knowledge about yourself. There are many people that have lived amazing lives, and they haven't known anything about astrology or anything about human design or any of this stuff. That being said, it is really powerful information that allows you to really accept yourself, know yourself, love yourself in a very deep way, to understand your role in the world, to understand your purpose, to get more clear on your unique ways of making decisions, which we'll get into. And I think the other thing I really love about this is how it supports you in relationship and how it supports you to understand the people in your life, your partners, your friends, your children. Sophie and I actually recorded a podcast yesterday talking about human design with someone else that had invited us, talking about human design and how it supports you in partnership. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the basics. I mean, we can get into other things, but if you're open and you're curious and you do want to know yourself, it is a cool tool. And even though astrology is integrated into it, I think what separates human design from some of these other systems, and I love these other systems. You can get into the tarot, you can get into human design, you can get into the cards, numerology. I mean, there's so many different systems that allow you to really understand your personality and behavior. But there's a simplicity and like a practicality to human design regarding strategy and authority that we'll get into that I just really like.
Mm-hmm.
There's a simplicity that you can kind of always hang your hat on to guide you.
Yeah. Thanks for that, man. That was great. As you were talking, I just looked up some other curious facts about, the origin of the system, some of which I thought, very interesting to share. So Ra didn't describe the voice as a spirit, angel, or deity. He said it was an impersonal and mechanical intelligence from what he called the neutrino ocean. He said it had no emotional warmth. It was utterly alien, relentless, and almost terrifying. The other thing that I found really interesting, he said, human design wasn't channeled gradually or pieced together over time. The entire system, gates, types, sensors, profiles, all of it was downloaded during those 8 days. It came in fully formed. And this is the most interesting part to me. He said the voice gave him a mandate. He wasn't given a gentle suggestion. He said it was more like an order. And that order was that this is for the children. The voice told him the human design system was for a future generation, that humanity would undergo a mutation, and this system was a preparation tool. So yeah, that's very interesting and something that I've found very prevalent in my own life in terms of understanding my kids, understanding the individuality, understanding how they're different from each other, understanding how that affects me as a parent and my parenting style, how that shifts between them as well.
I love that you said that because that's a quote that I use from him often where it's like Ra said it was about the children. So if you can understand your children and you can guide them, understand their uniqueness. I mean, a manifestor child is going to be different than a projector child. It's going to be different than a reflector child. So it just like supports their evolution and growth to not operate from the quote unquote not self and operate more in line with, that person they were born to be. I do want to just throw this in there because who knows, there might be someone listening that has come across this, is that the initial I guess, what do you want to call it, the voice, like the human design when it came through looked a little different than it is now. I think there may have only been like 2 strategies, but things have evolved over time. I just want to throw that in there just in case anyone comes in and goes, well, actually I came across this other system. And as we see with many pioneers and anyone who brings something forth in the world, there are going to be those that follow things according to the person that created it. And then there's going to be those that branch off and do their own thing and have different interpretations. So we're sharing things based on how I learned it and how Joel learned it. And we also understand that there are different ways of looking at it. There's some people, they don't use the tropical astrology for the calculation. They use sidereal astrology. And they say that that resonates more with them. It doesn't for me, or my wife Sophie is really into human design. So, as with anything, figure it out, see how it lands for you. But ultimately, we're here to talk about our experience with human design, how we learned it and how we teach it and the impact it has.
Yeah. So, I think a core reason why this episode and this conversation is going to be effective is because of the simplicity which we're going to point to. And I think that simplicity really comes down to strategy and authority. And so should we address strategy and authority in separate sections, I guess, beginning with strategy, and then we'll kind of dive into authority, or is there anything like basic you want to say about strategy and authority together in general before we get into that?
I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like your compass, really, strategy and authority together. Is really understand how your unique type like operates in the world. And then inner authority is your unique decision-making process. Some people will call it your personal intuition.
Yeah.
Because in human design, the mind is not an authority. The mind, the ajna center, is there to do what it does, process, put things into categories, take things in, analyze stuff. But our decision-making apparatus is much more intuitive. Now, of course, our mind still takes in this knowledge and supports us in making decisions per se. But our personal way of intuiting what is correct for us or not correct for us, it's much more, I would say, even somatic in that regards. So yeah, we could talk about strategy. Every type has its own strategy. So again, we're not going to go super deep into this, but you're about to say something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so maybe I'll share a little bit of my personal experience with strategy, and then we can kind of build from there. So we're both generators. And so the strategy of the generator is to wait to respond. And the thing is, like, I can't really share how much relief just this simple understanding kind of provided me in my life. Because the pressure dropped immediately for the need, the necessity, the drive, the constant urge to be doing more, to be initiating, to be pushing for something to happen, to make something happen. Why isn't the world giving into what I want fast enough, kind of thing? And just this light bulb that turned on the moment that I understood what it really means to be a generator. And each type obviously has their own auric field, which is unique as well. And for the generator, it's open and enveloping. And so we're constantly calling life to us. And so the strategy of the generator is to wait to see what you're calling in and then respond accordingly, whether it's for you or not, of course, which authority plays a role in that as well. But a big part of it is for the generator. Does it light you up? Does it inspire you? Does it make you want to move towards it in a very sacral, primal sense? And so, yeah, there's just a huge amount of relief in kind of understanding this for me and recognizing that if nothing is happening, like, it's okay, nothing needs to happen, but something is going to come into your field as a choice. And then you'll have the chance to respond, move forward, etc. So I just wanted to kind of share that as a personal experience.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just to let everyone know, just real quickly, we have the 4 types. A lot of people say 5 types, which sure, manifestation generator is a subtype and a hybrid. So I just want to go through real quickly. Manifestors make up around, let's say 8 to 9% of the population. Projectors make up 20% of the population. Generators and manifesting generators together make up around 70% of the population. And
Reflectors.
reflectors make up around 1 to 2% of the population. So, generators are a big part of the population. And it's probably like 35 or 37, 33 between generator and manifesting generator, but whatever. Anyways, when I talk about generators here, or we talk about generators, if you're a manifesting generator, this pretty much everything applies to you, because I don't want to keep saying generator or manifesting generator every single time.
Yeah.
But
I think that's a really important topic, is to talk about the fact that generators are 70% of the population, right? The type that is really here on a deeper sense to follow their bliss, to say yes to the things that really light them up, that excite them. Yet it seems as though we have, for the most part, a population of frustrated generators living in these people-pleasing archetypes, doing mundane things that don't inspire them, don't excite them, and what kind of effect that has on all of us as a collective,
Yeah, totally. And what Joel just said, he said frustrated generators. So every type has a signature and a not self theme. The signature is that quality, that state of being that presents itself when you're living in alignment with your design. You're saying yes to things that are correct for you. You're not, you're saying no to things that are incorrect for you. And so for manifestors, the signature is peace. For generators, the signature is satisfaction. For projectors, the signature is success/recognition. For reflectors, it's surprise. Now, on the flip side, we have the not self theme. So Joel mentioned frustration. That's the not self theme for generators. Manifesting generators have a little anger. They take that from the manifestors, which again, the manifestors not self theme is anger. Reflectors is disappointment. Projectors is bitterness. So if you know your chart, take a look and think about how these polarities, peace, anger, satisfaction, frustration, success, bitterness, surprise, and disappointment, how that play into your life based on what your type is. And so, the frustration from the generators, you have to understand that's coming. Generators are sacral beings. So generators and manifesting generators are the only ones that have the sacral center, which if you're looking at your chart, it's a second shape from the bottom, depending on what platform you're looking on. The one I'm looking on, it's colored red. That's the sacral center. That's what makes us generators and manifesting generators. We have that main motor where response comes from. Okay, that's the strategy Joel was saying before. We respond from there, and everyone else has that open. And we can get into this later about conditioning. But if generators are frustration, the non-energy types that have that center open, they're taking in that frustration and amplifying it. So Ra has said this before, that if generators are satisfied, the world changes. So if the large percentage of the population is really focusing on knowing themselves and going after what lights them up, the world changes. Which brings me back to this whole idea of self-knowledge. Of course, everyone wants to know themselves. But specifically, Ra talked about the Oracle of Delphi, which is know thyself. And he said that was actually written for generators, because generators are truly here, again, generators and manifesting generators, let me just say that again, are truly here to know themselves. Manifestors are here to know their impact on the other. Projectors are here to know and make sense of the other. Reflectors are here to know their environment. So with generators, again, we're generators, so we might be talking more about generators, and more of the population are generators. How do we know ourselves? Well, we know ourselves through response, through that sacral response Joel talked about earlier. So it's like we have this open and enveloping aura that Joel talked about. So life comes to us, opportunities come to us, people come to us, and we, yes, no, and possibly, I don't know yet. But we have this thing that we're drawn to. Like I could hold up 2 pieces of fruit to a generator, an orange and an apple. And they might be like, no, I don't want the fucking apple. Oh yeah, I want the orange. So there's a simple kind of inner guidance tool that you can use. It's like, it is simple at its core, but of course there's a lot of shit that gets in the way. There's mental distortion, mental conditioning, trauma that impacts our behavior. But at its core, man, we're here to listen to that deep voice of like what excites you, what lights you up, and what doesn't, and honor that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because human design is often referred to as a system of deconditioning as well, And it's like, what are we deconditioning from, if not the ways in which we were raised to not be ourselves and to question ourselves and to suppress our natural urges, instincts, intuitions, etc. And so, like you mentioned, this is for the children, and really understanding that through this experimentation and through like understanding human design, we can begin to raise our kids in a way where less deconditioning is required going further into the future, and that they can have more self-agency through having more self-knowledge and understanding who they are. Like, I've got 2 manifesting generator daughters, a reflector daughter, and a manifestor wife, so almost a full house of the types. And it's so obvious to me, how clear each type and their different strategies and authorities, etc., interplay within the dynamic, interplay within how I communicate to them, how I interact with my kids, how I feed my kids, like all of it. But yeah, and the key thing is that like this is an experiment. It's not, again, like you mentioned, dogma, where you're just going to take our word for it. You're just going to look at your chart, you're just going to read some things and be like, oh yeah, this is the way it has to be. This needs to be, and this needs to be a form of knowledge that you have really integrated for yourself through experimentation, which I think is really important as well, for it to be an embodied experience. And we're all in the experimentation process. Like, that's not something that ends either.
No, it's definitely a process. I mean, I first came across human design now, 11, 12 years ago, but I didn't really start getting into it until like 10. And like, when I found out that I was an emotional authority, again, inner authority is your decision-making process. And most of the population has an emotional authority. About 50% or 51% has an emotional authority. It changed things for me. It just like, wait, I could wait to make decisions. I'm living on emotional waves.
Yeah.
Like, that I could take time before I make some kind of decision. Like that changed me. And to understand, like, hey, just because I'm experiencing something doesn't mean that's it. That's like, I have to decide right away. I'm super lit up and excited. I have to decide in the moment, or I'm super down and a little depressed. I have to make a decision from that place. Like, it gave me more patience and self-understanding. So I just want to mention that.
Totally. And understanding myself as an emotional was really life-changing for me as well. Like, it's very, it gave me permission. It gave me permission to wait. It gave me permission to not respond and to make a decision immediately. And very interesting, a great writer, thinker, philosopher, Nassim Taleb, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, whatever his name is. I saw this quote of his earlier today, and I'm like, he has no understanding of human design, but like, I feel like this just applied to the emotional population in such a deep level. It says, never threaten when angry, never promise when joyful, never plan when gloomy, never reply when tired, never buy when euphoric, And like, that is just the ultimate mantra for the emotional authority, and understanding when you're off center, whether it's higher or lower, whether when you're on the peak of a wave, be it joy, be it anger, be it whatever it might be, or when you're in the low, when you're feeling apathetic, when you're feeling bored, when you're feeling tired, and really understanding on a deep level that these aren't the ideal times to make decisions, to write important emails, to respond with important texts, to engage in the argument with your wife, whatever it might be, and just understanding your authority on this level and diving into that dance with the relationship of your authority can provide you so much clarity, so much self-knowledge, so much more safety within your body as well, in just knowing yourself and giving yourself the time, giving yourself the permission, like, I'm on a fucking wave right now. Let me just wait. Let me just chill. And then really observing the dynamism within you that wants to jump out and do the thing. And, and it's interesting as well, because, I found that sometimes we can even mistake like synchronous moments or intuitive things for like highs and lows of waves. I'm just gonna fucking feeling about that person. Or when we're like on the high of the wave, feeling really euphoric and joyful about something. Oh, I know that's the path. I know that's the right way. I know that's what I got to do. I know I got to buy the thing. And it's like, find your center. Find your center.
I tell people to wait. I mean, I've given so many readings. I'm like, just wait. What does it hurt? Does it hurt to wait, 24 hours, 40 hours, 12 hours, maybe even longer? Just wait.
Yeah.
And I've done that so many times where like someone like, obviously we have a podcast that sometimes triggers people, and I'll get messages coming into my inbox from old friends. And like, I still want to get things out. So I will message, I'll take out my phone and write notes, like maybe write a response of how I want to respond. And then I just put my phone away, and then I'll come back to it 24 hours later. And most of the time I delete 80% of it, reword the rest, or don't even send it at all. You know what I mean? So like, you have to figure that out. But when you're in it, like emotional clarity comes over time. Emotional intelligence comes over time, not fucking reactions in the moment, where so many people are just like, I'm feeling it. This is true for me.
Yeah.
Like, cool. But why don't you wait? But that's for the emotional authority. The other 49, 50% of the population, they don't have the emotional center defined. Okay.
Yes. Does that mean they are not impacted? No.
Yeah, but they are, because they take in the conditioning from the waves. So this is where also like, it's not just enough to know human design. There's all these other understandings, like the nervous system lives in the solar plexus, lives in the emotional center. So it's like, what is the state of your nervous system? Are you living in sympathetic? Are you in dorsal? Are you shut down? Like, do you have capacity? Do you have a high window of tolerance? Can you hold space for discomfort within yourself? Because it's hard to be like, well, you should wait on your emotional wave if you don't even have that capacity. So you've got to build that capacity within yourself. We're just sharing information right now. Applying it is a whole nother thing.
Oh yeah.
So
totally. And like, how many times in your life have you made an emotional decision which has created a ripple effect, which you just wanted to get out of and been like, fuck, can this thing just end already? And it happens so often for me. It still does at times, but a lot less now. When we respond emotionally in the moment, it can just catalyze this domino effect that doesn't feel ideal, and that's kind of like what I would call like a mini cycle of karma, for making a decision when we're off center. Like, then we have to play out this thing. We might have to fall on our sword. We might have to, come to the table and realize, oh, I actually don't feel that strongly about it at all. And then sometimes people make an emotional decision and they set off, this catalyzing effect. Then they have to stand by their convictions. They have to stand by their initial responses, even when, more discernment comes in and they're like, ugh, actually things have shifted a little bit internally for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's super important is really just, it's just waiting. One of the downfalls of having an emotional authority is making decisions from like these triggered and high and low moments. And it's like you said, fuck, now I got to fucking deal with the repercussions of it. I mean, how many times have anyone listening to this, like said something to your partner or to your child or to your boss or a coworker, and then you're like, fuck,
Yeah.
You come back and you're, man, I wish I didn't say that. And this goes for like emotional and non-emotional. We all have emotions, it's just like the non-emotional, meaning the one who has an undefined, so in your chart, it's not colored in, solar plexus / emotional center, is that you take those emotions in sometimes and amplifying. So like the work for someone who doesn't have the emotional center colored in, or who isn't an emotional authority, is to really tune in to build that emotional intelligence of like, does this belong to me, or does this not belong to me? Am I taking this in from the environment and the people in my life? Mm-hmm. So I tell people that don't have an emotional authority, like even let's say a generator or a manifesting generator that is a sacral authority. So sacral authorities have more access to truth in the now. Emotional authorities don't. Their truth comes over time. Their understanding, the way they make decisions. But I still tell the sacral generators, like, listen, if you're around a lot of people, like you might want to go for a walk or be with yourself and then tune in to see if something's right for you, because you could be taking in this conditioning that's distorting your thinking, that's going to impact your decision making. So there's levels to this. There's simplicity and there's complexity to it.
Yeah, totally. Totally, man. Um, let's talk about manifestors for a bit, and kind of the dynamic with manifestors. I know for my wife, at least, like realizing and understanding herself as a manifestor has been completely life changing because the manifestor aura is obviously unique and very different from the generator in that sense. The manifestor has a repelling aura. So
Closed
the
and
natural
repellent.
closed and repelling. So the natural inclination is to push away. And this is why the manifestor, in many ways, has such a big impact when they walk into the room, when they speak their mind, when they whatever it might be. People feel it on a very visceral kind of level. And so, for the manifestor that doesn't know themselves as a manifestor, very often it can be like, why am I pushing so many people away? Why don't I seem to fit in anywhere? Why do people seem to be like scared and kind of afraid of me being truthful, of me speaking my truth, of me being in power, of me being on point? And very often for the manifestor child as well, this is kind of sensed on an unconscious level by the parents of a manifestor. And so there's almost more conditioning that takes place to suppress the manifestor, to turn the manifestor into a people pleaser, to have them, not be fully expressed, which is then in itself a whole, series of unraveling in the life of the manifestor.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, I had two manifestor parents. So, yeah, it's really interesting to see how I navigated that as a kid. But, I mean, I just tell every manifestor, like, inform, inform, inform. That's the strategy of the manifestor, is to inform. And so the more information you can give, even about the little things that you're doing, it's going to allow people to buy in more and prevent less resistance. Which, again, when you have less resistance, you're more likely as a manifestor to experience your signature, which is peace. Is that you
Yeah.
want manifestors crave peace. They want peace. But they definitely operate in a very different way. They're the only type, like, they're here to initiate. They're the initiators. Generators are the builders. Reflectors are I guess, the discerners, and projectors are the guides. And so, they're going to initiate, they're going to trigger people. They're kind of like tornadoes of energy. They get up and they just get after things. So a lot of times the people around them are like, what the fuck? A tornado just came through. I don't know what the hell is happening.
Yeah.
So I think for manifestors, the more you can inform, even on the simple things, I'm going to the bathroom, I'm going outside right now, I'm going to the store, as opposed to like you're operating like, 180 miles an hour and then everyone's left in the dust wondering what happened.
Yeah.
So something for
And
manifestors.
very often, due to what I mentioned before, with like how on an unconscious level, the manifestor is raised to suppress themselves more than other types. Um, the informing can come very difficult because they believe that they're going to be told no. Because generally speaking, growing up, that's what they got was a lot of no's. And so they always kind of came across in some kind of rebellious sense. And they really tend to, generally speaking, not for all manifestors, but the majority of manifestors that don't know they're manifestors and haven't really explored this, it's like, if I tell someone what I'm doing, I'm just going to be shut down. So I'm just going to do what I'm going to do and do it anyway. And the chips can fall where they may, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, I really love human design for this reason. Like, we can get out of the compare and contrast game and understand that there's this unique soul blueprint that we have. And this knowledge can help you really understand yourself more, like I said before, and again, like a manifestor versus like a projector or reflector is very, very different. And so you said earlier, this is about the children. And so all the parents out there, again, I'm not saying you have to have this knowledge in order to raise healthy children, but it helps. I can't tell you how many times I've sat down with parents and I'm just taking out their charts. Something Sophie and I like to do is we like to kind of like, especially if friends come over, or even, we've done readings where, we have the charts of their children, and like they'll have like an MG child and a projector child, or a manifestor child and a projector child. And like how you go about communicating and dealing with them, and again, you would know, is very, very different. Sure, foundational principles on being a parent are going to be there. But how you talk to them and how you ask them questions, or how you even just kind of manage them and guide them, is going to be very different. So I've told things to people that were like, oh my God, this this helps so much. And they always have that like the smile of recognition or the little laugh of like, yes, my son, when I invite him, at least a projector, he totally loves it. It's like he needs to have the invitation. So it's like, are you inviting the projector? Are you giving things to the generator to respond to? Maybe don't ask open-ended questions. Provide options to a generator child. Do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want to do that? Do you want to do this? As opposed to, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
So these are like little things that you can integrate. And this is just for kids. Like my wife does this to me. She's a projector. I'm a generator. Granted, I don't have the pure sacral in the moment, but I still have that thing that excites me. I have the sacral response. So like, I like having options, as opposed to like, what do you want to have for dinner tonight? Like maybe, hey, do you want sushi or do you want to go to like Urban Plates or something? And then I could go, okay, sushi.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that is like so prominent even in my life as well. My two eldest daughters, my eldest Valley, she's a reflector. My middle child, Naya, she's a manifesting generator. And just like, picking clothes is such an interesting experience. Like, Naya, do you know wear this today? Do you know wear this today? Like, she knows that's easy. With Valley, like, you cannot pressure her to make a choice around the clothes at all. She's going to take her time. She's going to do her thing. If she feels rushed, it's not going to be a good experience for anyone whatsoever. She really needs to take her time and feel into what she feels like wearing for that day, what she's most comfortable in. And this happens like every single day, And so just another kind of mental kind of checkbox where it's like, it's kind of wild how we can have this information about our children and it be so prevalent. Yeah.
And it's so cool too, because again, it's not about, this is the thing sometimes with people who learn this stuff, like human design or astrology or whatever, like you could become a slave to the information and then you can look at everything through it. And then you can micromanage everything around like the things in your astrology chart, human design, body graph, whatever. And it's like, you don't be one of those people. like sure, you might have to go through that journey.
Yeah.
But like, if you're micromanaging based on their human design chart, it can be a lot. Like, understand the foundational principles and apply them. Like, again, there's so many elements of human design you can get into, but I think in the beginning, until you master or really embody strategy and authority, like, I think the other stuff is extra. I'm not saying don't go into it. It's really cool. Your profile is very, very important. It's a huge part of your whole imprint. But strategy and authority is the gold.
That's the gold. Strategy and authority is the gold. And you can really streamline your life, streamline your decision-making process. It can cut away so much debris, so much unnecessary debris, mental debris, physical debris, whatever it might be, just by really understanding and embodying strategy and authority. And really what it does, we're all the captain of our own soul, the captain of our own ship. But this is just like an advanced piece of technology to be able to navigate in a way which we previously didn't have. And it's definitely something that has added incredible benefit to my life. Like there's so much more clarity that comes, like much more less of just a leaf floating in the wind, trying to like navigate relationships, trying to navigate career, trying to navigate raising kids, trying to navigate what I want to eat, trying to navigate whatever it might be. And there's just so much more clarity in terms of the best way to engage, the best way to interact, what I really need to be doing next, Yeah.
I think, this knowledge is getting more popular at a time because we're there. We're ready for it to happen. We're ready to differentiate even more and to understand ourselves more as an individual. And actually, we're moving into this new age. In your human design chart, everyone has an incarnation cross, which is kind of like your purpose. It's like this background kind of theme that runs in your life. But also on like a planetary level, we're going, we have an incarnation cross. So like we're about to move from the cross of planning to the cross of the sleeping phoenix. They're 400-year cycles. So the sleeping phoenix we're moving from a more tribal collective of the cross of planning to more individualistic. It's like really differentiating and understanding yourself as an individual and cultivating emotional intelligence. And and more nervous system capacity is this age that we're moving into. And so it makes sense that this kind of knowledge is coming more to the forefront, or even the fact that like more somatic and nervous system understanding is coming to the forefront. You see more and more people talking about it. I can't say everyone's talking about it in maybe the most ideal ways, but it's coming out there. People are understanding the importance of feeling, of sensation, of having that deep level of somatic awareness and how it supports you in gaining more emotional intelligence and more clarity and knowing yourself, because that's what's going to be required as we move forward. And we see it in the world. You know, listen, at the end of the day, we're young. From a human standpoint, we're young regarding emotional intelligence. And so we're moving towards greater intelligence emotionally. And I think human design is a tool, especially when you look at the solar plexus and the emotional authority and undefined individuals in the solar plexus, like how that can support your understanding of yourself and others.
Yeah. My observations tell me that humanity receives the tools, the systems, the ideas, the philosophies, etc., that it requires as per its, current journey in its spiritual evolution. And human design is a key component of that, for sure. Much of the things that have been coming into the fray in recent history, like are interesting to observe in light of the spiritual evolution of humanity as well. Whether it's German new medicine, whether it's taking children seriously, whether it's our relationship with AI that is kind of now coming into the picture as well, and so I don't take these things lightly, regardless of how they kind of come in, because these are the real upgrades in a sense that we're being given. It's not like, we're ascending to like different dimensions. But it's like you see the way that the upgrades come in as humanity becomes more ready. And human design is far and away one of the most practical, useful, and, immediately applicable kind of systems that are available to us. And honestly, in my personal experience, it actually is a lot more practical than astrology. That might not be everyone's opinion. That's my personal opinion. Astrology is an incredible tool for self-knowledge. Again, there's obviously many different variations of astrology, etc. But in terms of, like we're repeating on this conversation, strategy and authority is very simple to understand. You don't require any understanding of archetypes. You don't require any understanding of, transits, constellations, squares, whatever it might be, etc. It's just, what is my strategy here? Is it to wait to respond? Is it to wait to be invited? Is it, to inform? What is my authority? Whatever it might be. And it's like immediately applicable in a real basic, practical way.
Yeah. I agree. I want to just highlight projectors real quickly, since we haven't talked about them.
Might as well get to reflectors briefly after that too.
Yeah. A little bit. We touched on the projectors a little bit, but we talked about their signature, which is recognition and, satisfaction. I'm sorry, success. But, projectors seem to have a little confusion around, like, what do you mean? I just sit around waiting to be invited? Well, it's not really that. Obviously, projectors are here to build mastery. They have an efficiency. They can bring efficiency to different systems. So it's like, as a projector, like, what are you really into? What do you want to learn?
Yep.
And keep learning it, keep doing it. Because ultimately there's going to come a time where someone's going to recognize you for your mastery and for what you know and for your ability to really understand energy and how to guide. And they're going to be like, I like what you're about. And then you can come in and give all the gold that you have. But too many projectors, I feel like, because of the conditioning in the Western world, they just push and they force. And then what happens is, they might experience rejection, and then they're going to come up to their not self theme, which is bitterness. Every projector I've worked with, they understand that quality of bitterness and resentment. It's like deep in them. Mm-hmm. And so very important to just keep doing what you're doing, learning what you're learning, loving it, and waiting, because the right time is going to come.
Yeah. Yeah. My brother's a projector, and so is my dad. And understanding that later in my life, when I came into human design, was another massive, eye-opening thing. Like, these are two individuals that are incredibly high-level systems thinkers, like working on strategies and systems. And, my dad, I watched him like day and night tinker with concrete mixers, like the tiniest degrees, tiniest fractions, trying to perfect, this chemical mix. And, same with my brother. And like, for a lot of my life growing up, was like, why isn't Joel into this? kind of thing. Why isn't Joel able to be inspired by such, intricate, mundane system kind of things? And for a lot of it was like, is something wrong with me? Like, am I the apple that fell a little bit too far from the tree kind of thing? But then later in life, the projectors, they love systems. They love tinkering. They love being able to
making things more
apply,
efficient.
making things more efficient.
Which is, it's crazy. I forgot that they were both projectors. So we were
Yeah.
talking about this the other day, and it's like, oh yeah, of course they're into it. Like, okay, how can I make this concrete or whatever more?
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and I felt like, I was projected onto a little bit in that sense for not having the same enthusiasm around some of these things that they did. Like I was always the rogue. I wanted to do my own thing and do what I wanted, which is what the generator needs to be able to do. So yeah, in hindsight, there's so much that can be unpicked and
Yeah.
light can be shed.
And my wife is a projector too. And so that's been such an interesting journey, just understanding I'm a generator and a projector. And then like I have the sacral. So projectors aren't here to keep up with generators. I mean, that's the conditioning influence, is like, not knowing when enough is enough, for the projectors. Like you have to find your time and your space and understand that you work in bursts of energy. Doesn't mean you don't have energy. It's just you have energy for the things that like you're into and that like you're invited into, so it's okay. Like if you're a projector and you feel like, oh man, I feel like I need naps, or, I need to conserve my energy, like nothing is wrong with you. It's totally okay.
Bro, it's so wild, man. Like my dad would just nap at the drop of the hat in like the middle of the day for just like 4 or 5 hours, just like straight out. So
Yeah.
it's so interesting.
Well, my dad too. My dad's a manifestor. Now they're not generators, obviously have their own little throat connected to a motor, but they don't have the sacral center. My dad was the master napper.
Yeah.
I mean, every day he'd come home from work. He had his business. He'd come home from work, sleep from like 2 to 4 or something, get up, go back to work until late. And he did it for his whole life. And so my dad lived to be 93 years old. So you see those articles online of like, oh, napping leads to longevity. Like I have no doubt that my dad taking his little European siesta in New Jersey or whatever, like led to his longevity. And on some, I mean, he didn't know human design, but on some level, he knew this about himself. Now, sure, culturally, there is that whole thing of siesta, but not everyone's actually napping. They're just taking a break. Yeah. So, but he literally napped like on the couch. It's like, I was used to it my whole life. So.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Me too. Reflectors.
They're 1% of the population, but I don't talk about them. They're your daughter. You can figure it out. Well, no, listen, like I said before, reflectors are here to be surprised, and then disappointment is their not self theme. And so anyone that's a reflector has an entire open chart. When I mean open, I just mean the centers. They have gates that are activated. And so their authority is to wait an entire lunar cycle. They are lunar beings. So now this isn't for kind of not major decisions. Obviously, if you're to ask a reflector, what would you like to eat tonight? They're not going to say, I'll let you know in 28 days. But for major decisions, they need time. They need time to wait, to figure things out. And the environment, like I mentioned before, is the most important thing to a reflector. So making sure their environment is on point. They reflect back so much clarity. They have the potential to be the wisest, to bring wisdom and to shine a light on humanity. And they can be super conditioned because every center is undefined.
Yeah. Ultimately, reflectors, I guess, serve as mirrors for the health of their community or the health of the tribe, in a more kind of primal, ancient sense. And one thing I've noticed, with having a reflected daughter, like they really do amplify the energy from everyone around them. Whatever is being absorbed just goes through and kind of is raised to another level. But ultimately they're barometers for truth, reflecting back very often what others can't see, or where something might be missed or something might be unsaid within a family dynamic as well. Like they're going to feel all that.
Really cherish the reflectors in your life. I've met, I think 5 now, 5 or 6. And, you can have 100 people in a room, and probably one is going to be a reflector, which is actually really interesting. Sophie and I did a human design workshop at Confluence last year.
Yeah.
And what was interesting, I would say we probably had, let's say, around 100 people or so in the room. And part of our workshop, what we did is we separated people to sit according to type. So we had people sit according to type. And I would say the ratios kind of worked out. You know, primarily the room was primarily manifesting generators and generators. And then you had like, you know, a handful of manifestors. And then you had like, like, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 projectors. There weren't any reflectors, but check this out. When we left the workshop and I went to sit down at one of the tables, someone who I'd met prior came up to me, hey, I wanted to come to your workshop. I came in, but there wasn't really any room on the floor. And she's like, I was curious because I'm a reflector.
Oh, wow.
So it's like that one person in that room of, let's say, 100 people, 90 people, whatever. And it was just wild. Like we didn't have one in the actual thing. But then when I get out the door, I meet the one reflector. So that was kind of cool because you hear these numbers like, oh, the ratios are this percentage. And you're like, where the fuck do they get these numbers from? And then to see it in real time was kind of affirming for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. When empowered, reflectors, they really are the sages, the oracles, you know, the space holders, so to speak. And like we're saying, like environment is so important. It's kind of everything for the reflector. And very often, like the primary question for the reflector is simply, where am I and who am I with? You know, like that really matters more than anything else.
Yeah, well said. So, you know, we covered some areas. We talked about types, you know, we covered inner authority and strategy, which is really important. We talked about the signature and the not self theme. Anything else?
There's a lot of other authorities which we didn't touch on, which I definitely recommend to go explore, or we can kind of touch on something now if you want to.
I would say go more explore it, but we could talk about the other two main ones. I brought up the sacral really quickly. So sacral authority would be a manifesting generator or a generator that doesn't have the solar plexus defined in their chart. So when I say defined, or when we're talking about defined, it's colored in your chart. So if you look at all the shapes, you know, they're the different centers that relate to different things. You got the crown, you got the head or the crown, you got the mind, also known as the ajna, you have the throat, you have the G center, you have the heart / ego center, you have the emotional solar plexus, which we've talked a bunch about. We have the sacral, the root is at the bottom, and then the spleen is opposite to the solar plexus. But yeah, the sacral center is what I mentioned before. It's a manifesting generator who doesn't have the emotional center defined. And they have more truth in the now. They have that pure connection to that sacral that I mentioned before, of that where pure response comes from. Yes, no. So the more you can honor that and trust that, and that could be moment to moment. You know, it's not like, oh, I said yes now, and then 20 minutes later I have to stick with it.
Yeah.
You know, it's really trusting that kind of inner compass and that intuition. Then the next more popular one would be the splenic authority. So that would be a manifestor or a projector that doesn't have the emotional center colored in, but has the splenic center defined. And so that, I would say, is like the most subtle and quickest decision-making process, because the spleen center relates to this primal fight or flight. It's about really knowing on a very subtle way what's healthy for you and not healthy for you. So it's really trusting that inner voice that tells you like, no, don't go to that restaurant, or don't hang out with that person, or don't continue dating this person. It's very subtle. And it's like, you have to kind of get it in the moment and honor that. So the splenic authorities that I've connected with, they know that about themselves, but a lot of times the mind gets in the way. They overthink things. And so like once that moment's passed, you kind of have to, you know, wait for the next one. Because if you start going into overly critical, analyzing pros and cons, like that takes you away from that deep wisdom that lies within.
Yeah. They're very often like the splenic authority can appear to be the least kind of rational as well. Like it might be you're about to walk into a party or walk into a movie theater, then you're just overcome with this feeling of I shouldn't walk in there, right? And it's honoring that, because really at its core, the splenic authority is all about survival, and it's all about the health of the individual as well. What decisions are right for me? What is correct for me? And yeah, it's a very, very like subtle felt sense of, is this correct or not?
I'm gonna share I'm going to share a personal story that is really deep and impactful to me, but it relates to this. I had a dear friend of mine in Los Angeles who was had a splenic authority. And 40 years ago, he got involved in a situation that wasn't ideal, and he was murdered. And it was this whole big national news story. And I guarantee you, probably multiple points leading up to what got him killed, he probably had I shouldn't be doing this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And whatever comes in, whatever rationalizing or thinking of like, oh, I got to follow through with this, I got to do this, and it's unfortunate. Now, I can never know for sure, but considering what I know about the situation, and I just don't want to divulge too much right now, is like, it would be impossible for him to not have those hits of like, this is not healthy for you. There's danger.
Yeah.
And so, the more you can get in touch with and trust that intuitive, instinctual hit, it's going to guide you. And as we're talking about authority, I want to kind of share another story stories. This has happened multiple times in my readings with people, where when we're talking about authority, and especially if they're a splenic or a sacral, I've asked clients, I go, was there a time in your life when you like knew something, like you got this hit of knowing, but you didn't honor that?
Yeah.
Let's say it's a splenic or even a sacral. And I've had a few people be like, yeah, on my first date with my partner, like whatever, they're like walking up to the table and something in them is like, no. But then they sit down, they have some drinks, they realize they like the same foods, the same music. One thing leads to another. Who knows what other conditioning and patterning is in there. And then, they get married, they do their thing, and then ends up being this huge blow up. Now, that could be part of their story. So I'm just saying that, like, this isn't about completely relieving suffering from your life. But like we talked about before with the emotional authority, like, listen, we're human beings. We're going to deal with shit in life. Like, that's just what it means to be a human being on this planet. But maybe we can suffer 30, 40% less. Maybe we don't have to have that much pain. Maybe things can be a little easier. And I think human design is one way that can support you. Because when you think about it, outside of some things out of your control, your life is a combination of every single decision and choice that you've made in your life. How many do you make in a single day? How many really important decisions do you make in a month, in a year? And so if you can have a tool that supports you, that's more aligned with you to make more correct decisions for you, I think you can limit the pain, the suffering, and the heartache.
Well said, man. Beautifully said. Yeah. And like, it really is kind of intrinsically tied to self-esteem as well, because self-knowledge in many ways is self-esteem. Your self-concept is your destiny. The way that you think and feel about yourself is where you're going to end up in life. And without self-knowledge, like you mentioned with the first date example, we're going to be more inclined to make decisions based upon our conditioning. And very often in those first date examples is the conditioning is, at least somebody likes me, at least somebody is into me, at least, somebody wants to be with me. And we kind of settle.
Yeah.
That settling is something that can take you 10, 15, 20 years to kind of realize, I've had clients share with me that they had those hits walking down the aisle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, do you trust yourself, or do you honor yourself? Do you know these things about you? Because it's easy. I mean, how many times do you go like, oh, I got this hit? You might not even know human design. You're just like, oh, I knew I shouldn't have done that. I knew I shouldn't have followed through with that. So again, like, information like human design just adds to your pool of self-knowledge. Because then again, we have a mind. We experience life. We're always thinking. We're always processing. So if we have the self-knowledge and we have an experience, we can process it like, okay, yep, that makes sense. I know this about myself. I'm going to honor that. Yeah,
totally, man. I think we've covered a decent amount of ground here, which I'm feeling pretty good about. We didn't really touch on life themes too much, but that's been a pretty profound and important aspect for me as well.
We got to touch on profile. We didn't touch on profile.
We didn't touch on profiles at all.
Well, just a real quick
Go for it.
Because profiles are important. They make up a huge, like I said earlier, imprinting of your design. there's 12 total profiles in human design. They're made up of numbers 1 through 6. These are the lines of the hexagram, the hexagrams of the I Ching, the Chinese Book of Changes. So there's 12. I'm a 5-1. Joel's a 6-2. So they're kind of like the costume that you wear. They're like your personality. So I'm known as the heretic investigator. Joel's known as the role model hermit. And I don't need to go into specifics of what mine is, but it just relates fully. It's another way of understanding yourself and your place in the world and how you go about doing things. So like if you're looking up your human design chart, see what you are. Are you a 1-3? Are you an investigative martyr? Are you a 2-4? Are you a 2-5, which is more rare?
Yeah.
Are you a 3-5, which there's a lot of 3-5s out there. My wife's a 3-5. Like it's another aspect of human design to really explore and go into. I don't know if there's anything you want to talk about personally, or we can, maybe.
Well, I mean, understanding my profile is just another like light bulb moment where it's like, oh, just makes so much sense knowing myself as a 6-2, knowing that I'd love at times to just be a hermit and to be in my natural zone of creative genius, and just explore explore that through line and be with, that inherent creativity that kind of wants to come through. And also like really embodying the 6th line as I kind of, venture further down this career path and, becoming someone whose words really matter and building more discernment about how I share what I say when I say, because I know on some level that it's taken a little bit more seriously, through my lens and this archetype of the role model, so to speak. And also like in all of this and everything that we've said, it's made me just love myself like so much more. Like I love who I am. I love my unique design. I love my unique gifts. And it's really awesome that like I kind of have this clarity about the things in my life that I get to double down on. I get to swim in and I get to play in. And, other things in my life have taken a step down and it's less important. I don't need to be everything. I don't need to do everything. I don't need to, fill all the cups, so to speak. Like there's certain things which I'm really good at and which really align with me, who I am, which really maximize the impact that I can have in the world. And I can focus on doing those. And to me, like that feels great. It's like I get to prioritize my energy with way more efficiency as a result of this level of self-knowledge as well.
Yeah. And real quickly, just because it doesn't take very long, we'll just go through the 6 lines and what they mean.
Okay,
because
sure.
Yeah, like the 1 line is the first line.
We should have just got into this episode thinking like, let's just touch on everything, at least in some capacity, as opposed to we have a conversation that we're like, oh, let's get to that.
Well, yeah, but that's just like you start talking about something and then you want to bring context to it. Listen, even what I'm going to say now, it's just like a quick couple minutes of each line. So we have the 1 line is known as the investigator. It's all about building that solid foundation of learning and investigating because there's an inherent insecurity on the 1 line that wants to feel secure. So you want to learn those skills. You want to learn that knowledge. The 2 you talked about is the hermit. You kind of have these natural abilities. They want to kind of be off on their own, doing their own thing, marching to the beat of their own drum. They kind of like to be called forward. The 3 is all about it's known as the martyr. It's all about trial and error. Like the 3s are here to kind of learn what works, what doesn't work, kind of figure it out, jump right in. The 4 is all about friendships and networks, and it's known as the opportunist. There's a friendliness and a kindness of like really your networks are super, super important for you. The 5, which is what I am, the 5 is here about, the 5 is also very projected upon, but it's here to find practical solutions to challenges. They can be a teacher, a leader. The 6, which Joel talked about, is the ultimate role model, but the 6 works in 3 phases. The first 30 years of their life, they're actually at 3. So like they're here to build all those subjective experiences, bump into life, bump into relationships, figure out what works, what doesn't work. Then they have that second phase, which is known as the going on the roof phase, age 30 to 50, where they kind of take a step back. They kind of like turn all those subjective experiences into more objective wisdom. This is the time they kind of settle into their family and their career. And then they move in the 3rd stage, they fully embody that role model. Doesn't mean you can't be a role model because all the 6 lines I know, they have knowledge, they have wisdom. They could be fucking 10 years old sometimes and they're dropping wisdom. So, but that's just kind of like how that trajectory operates. So depending on your profile, you're going to have 1 number in the first slot, which is the more personality line. It's more conscious. And then the second number will be in the design side, which is a little bit more unconscious. So, keep exploring on your own. Also, you could also join us in Friends of the Truth, because we have a subtopic thread that's just for divination, astrology, human design. So we have all sorts of conversations there. You can come in there and ask questions. But hopefully you got something from this episode. Hopefully it's piqued your interest. Hopefully it's allowed you to understand things in a maybe more practical, simple way.
One little cool piece of trivia I kind of want to share before we close this one up for good is related to the kind of life theme thing. And so my life theme basically is all about resources, having the right resources, being able to accumulate the right resources to help myself and others kind of live out their purpose. Yerasimos' life theme is all about education, sharing knowledge. And what do we have here through the synergy of the both of us is a business that creates resources, which is focused on educating and inspiring, So just another very clear affirmation of the places that you end up in life and how in some ways, much of these paths were kind of, sprinkled with something, to kind of guide you upon the way. Dude,
it's so cool. I love that you brought that up, because for me, like lefting across of education, like it's for me to inspire people that education is their birthright. And a lot of times the things I'm into, I talk about it via lecture format. So it's like I'm just like kind of talking out there, and if people are into it, they're into it. And I don't care if you're not into it, you're not into it. I'm just gonna do my thing. So it's really fun to see how these things play out. And like you said, it just leads to greater, like it almost is like a breath of fresh air. I don't need to be like that person. Sure, you can look externally for inspiration, but at the end of the day, you are one of one. And so whatever you can do that allows you to stake that flag in the ground of like, I am Yerasimos. There are no other Yerasimoses in the world. There never has been, there never will be. I am me. Like whatever allows you to do that, own it.
That's it, man. That's the gold right there. Is that there's no one like you. There's never been someone like you. There never will be someone like you. to quote Yerasimos. And what a fucking gift. Like there is so much beauty in that, especially we've had like tens of thousands of years of history of just this collectivist ideology, which wants to diminish you, that wants to keep you small, that wants to make you think that, you're not worthy, you're not deserving, you just need to be the same as everyone else. Everyone deserves the same, no matter what, so to speak. And with human design, you really do become the canary in the gold mine. And you get the chance to invigorate and inspire your life by recognizing that you've been bestowed with a divine blueprint that is only yours. And if you value your truth, if you value life, if you value existence, then you value that divine blueprint. And the only question left is, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? And that right there is the ethos of Here for the Truth. So all that being said, much love. Appreciate you all so much. Thanks for being here. Thanks for engaging. Hope you're enjoying our HFTT Friday articles. For those that aren't on the list yet, head to heretforthetruth.com/Friday. And every Friday, we're dropping deep insights in long form articles about the topics that really matter to us. And the feedback's been amazing. So guys, we'll see you next time. Peace. And that wraps up today's journey. But hey, the truth train doesn't stop here. Every Friday, we drop little nuggets of wisdom straight to your inbox. We're talking mind-expanding ideas, heart-opening perspectives, and the kind of content that hopefully makes you go, whoa, I never thought of it that way. Our Friday drops like having coffee with that friend who always blows your mind. Except this friend shows up right on schedule and never asks to borrow money. So if you want to join our truth-seeking tribe, it's super easy. Just hop over to heretforthetruth.com/Friday and hit that subscribe button. No spam, no fluff, just pure unfiltered goodness delivered weekly. So if you're ready to make your Fridays a little more truthful, a little more inspiring, and a whole lot more awesome, your future self will thank you for this one. See you next time. And remember, we're always here for the truth, and we're always here for you.